Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of Stream Time Sports. My name is Chris Dunn, the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, we are still basking in the glory that was Sports Pro London at a very sunny oval in South London. Now, one of the things that came up quite a bit, Nick, and I think that probably aligns with coverage we've talked about, is YouTube. I mentioned it in my scene setter. The other week we played your presentation that you gave setting, the 8 realities or the reality check for the sports industry. I gave the scene setter for the media track where I talked quite a bit about YouTube, its penetration across the globe in terms of usage, highlighting some of the different things like we're seeing with the BBC here in the UK, but also reflecting on what YouTube's doing in America, given the fact that they're now live streaming NFL games. They're rumored to be getting more of those games with the ESPN NFL merger and some of those games now being available. That YouTube is taking quite a big approach, multiple different layers across the ecosystem. And it seems even in a lot of the LinkedIn posts afterwards, lots of people were talking about YouTube. And I guess, Nick, maybe, we talked about reality checks, going to throw you under the bus here, not a ton of prep on this. There is a lot of positivity about YouTube. Is there perhaps something maybe around YouTube that we need a reality check on?
I would say yes. I think there was a little bit of reality check depends on who you're listening to. I think my thing with the reason I did the reality check stuff is that everyone has a different experience going on social media and the different platforms that we consume content. But I get conserved a lot of positivity around platforms like YouTube. And then when I talk to people in person who are doing it, it ain't all smooth sailing. Shock. It's actually there's the challenge of getting the maximum value out of the effort that you can put into it is still tricky, particularly on the monetization side. And there's almost added pressure to produce high quality content. And what I mean by that is, sports, as if you're broadcasting sports live or non-live, the margins of what good looks like versus great is actually really quite small. Like you don't have to. The ratings of a sporting event live don't really change that much unless the sporting experience is poor. But in terms of like producing that, it's pretty easy to do once you get into the rhythm of production of it. But I think when you look at YouTube and social, particularly from sports lens, and people who perhaps haven't historically had a lot of experience on those platforms historically, you have to keep iterating a lot till you find something that works for those platforms. So I think there's more pressure and exposure on those who are working on YouTube to keep iterating and improving the platform. And most people will tell you those algorithms on those platforms, you need to be doing more just to get basically a bump up in visibility by just being more active on those platforms. So it's different to say some other social media platforms where any one piece of content can just do well. With YouTube, you have to keep grinding it out, producing stuff every day on those platforms to keep your algorithm rating higher. At least that's what I hear anyway. So obviously we'll perhaps talk to some YouTube experts soon to get more insight on that. Well, obviously we talked to Brave Bison, who gave us some good insights there as well, but it's tricky. I think it's a lot trickier to get value and have a linear line to success basically on YouTube is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I had the opportunity to speak to Martin Raffel, who's the director of audience development at Brave Bison. He gives a little bit of background as to who they are, but they are an official partner of YouTube, so they are someone that YouTube works with, and they really do focus on that intersection of working with rights holders, them being the agency, and then YouTube being the platform. They kind of see all different sides of that. And we, myself and Martin, spoke specifically around the monetization models. YouTube has been rolling out some different things. Obviously, they've got their ad model, which runs as it does, but they've also been introducing new things such as the membership only model for content. They've also been introducing some pay-per-view models, all things that are kind of, to your point, trying to make YouTube a more profitable platform to justify the ROI that you're going to spend on it. Because I think to your point, and one of the things Martin's talked about is YouTube does has to be created or treated as its own channel. And I think that's one of the things that's even come up with something like the BBC moving to YouTube, is that's where audiences are going. YouTube is really kind of, in some ways, the positive view, could be viewed as the new TV. And one of the other things Martin and I spoke about is the amount of usage via connected TV is also changing the way I think people have to consider how content needs to be produced on YouTube, because they do have the shorts model, which is helping with some of the monetization, but it is a completely different strategy and approach given how much people are now using connected TVs, which I think for me makes a ton of sense, because I probably on my connected TV spend most of my time on YouTube, whereas 5 years ago. It might have been on my desktop or it might have been on my phone. Just even the devices that you're using has completely changed. Some of the different monetization models, or even how you go about producing content.
Yeah, I do think it's tricky for a couple of reasons. Like everyone will tell you, you need to create content for the platforms, right? Not just you
Yeah,
can't create one piece of content or work across them all. But that sounds great and that's easy to say. But if you've got limited resources, you also need content that can work across all platforms. Otherwise, it does take a lot of work to create something dedicated and custom for each and every platform if you want to be successful on them. So there is that sort of tension point about, yes,
yeah,
you need to be bespoke for those platforms, but also it does need to work on others if you want to
yeah,
maximize the value of your resources going into creating content itself. Ultimately, the conundrum with monetization is still around that the programmatic advertising angle on things is still just too low. That's why they want to be talking about themselves as the new TV. They want to drive CPMs up with advertisers who've been spending so much money on broadcast and TV, because by raising CPMs, it'll make it more worthwhile for everyone to be producing content for YouTube. So at the moment, sports has to maximize the value out of YouTube by the digital sponsorship related activations and activities, like most people do, like most content creators do. If you're just leaning on programmatic alone, you will not be maximizing the value that YouTube brings to the table. So there's a lot of work to go into it. It's not like there's some sort of like secret I don't want to say this. Do I say silver bullet again? Not sort of
yeah.
some sort of silver bullet
Secret
that's just
sauce.
gonna, yeah, secret sauce is probably a better description on how you can just drive instant value. But with a lot of work, it can have iterative impact. But to what extent, again, is up for discussion.
Well, me and Martin do get into that. So if you want to hear more about the different
I
monetization
do.
models that YouTube is rolling out yet, then definitely listen to it. We talk about some of the different monetization models that exist, what's working, what's not working. How do you potentially drive people from YouTube to your own first party platforms? Because that is one of the shortcomings about YouTube that might be the reality check, Nick, is that, hey,
Mm.
it's great for eyeballs, but if you're trying to collect first party data that you might want to give off to sponsors or somebody else, like you are still lacking that. So is there a way to use YouTube as a way to drive people? Not too dissimilar to the conversation we had with TikTok and the affiliations that they were doing with DAZN. We talk about the question, what's more important? Is it the format? Is it the person? Is it the content itself? Because, we talked about it's not too dissimilar to your presentation where Erling Holland has set up a YouTube channel, but his most popular content has nothing to do with football. And how do you solve that conundrum of what's actually most important there? There's lots of questions around those things about best usage. And I think ultimately what Martin comes with is there are things they know work well on YouTube, but there's also no blueprint that's going to work because authenticity, we're learning these days, is so important. There you go, the big word authenticity, that you can't just go and copy someone else's playbook because it works well. If it doesn't fit your audience, your voice, there's only so much you can do to replicate stuff. It's not as simple as just, but that's the whole point of stream time, right, Nick? We talked to all these different OTT companies, streaming platforms, rights holders. None of them can do it the same way, but there are maybe some things to maybe avoid. But like I said, Mara and I go through all of that, and it's a really, I think, enlightening conversation for those that are trying to figure out what can you potentially earn from YouTube. What are some of the realities of what that's going to require, both resource and time behind it. But yeah, it's a really good conversation, Nick. And I think for anyone that's trying to grasp their head more around the realities of YouTube, it's a great conversation.
Good. Well, I think we should probably do a little call out. If there's anyone that knows or anyone that wants to speak about their approach to YouTube, what's working, what's not, we'd love to hear from you because I think we'd be keen to do a little bit more of a focus on it over the next
Yeah,
several months in the build up to our Media Summit event, especially where YouTube will probably be a pretty important topic on the agenda
yeah,
again, I think, for 2026.
for sure. Well, everyone, I'm going to hand things over to my conversation with myself and Martin, and we will catch you on the next episode of Stream Time Sports. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of Stream Time Sports. My name is Chris Stone, I'm the community lead, and today I'm joined by Martin Raffel, the Director of Audience Development at Brave Bison. And today, Martin, we're going to be talking about YouTube. Very good time to be talking about it. We're here at Sports Pro London today. It's been a topic multiple times. I'm going to speak about it later in my presentation. But when we talk about YouTube, before we kick things off a little bit, do you have a favorite non-sports YouTube channel that you watch?
Ooh, yeah. So, I mean, I watch a lot of different things on YouTube, and sometimes you're fed stuff from the algorithm that they know you better than you know yourself. But I think Liam Brown, a guy that just walks.
Nice.
Okay, it's nice, relaxing content. If I've been watching sports content all day and analyzing sports content, what I want is something that's completely relaxing. And he does these long hikes, and you just hear the sound of nature, and it's nice and relaxing. So he's one of my favorites. Not the most notable name, but he's pretty good.
It's really interesting because when I was on paternity, I discovered the Outdoor Boys.
Oh, nice.
And honestly, to your point, it was just so relaxing because like there was no sponsorship, there's no ulterior motive. It was just a man enjoying his family, enjoying nature. So it's really interesting, you and I, like sort of what we're looking at. Like we're sports people. Like we're not even trying to watch sports content on YouTube, despite that's what we're going to talk about later. But yeah, I really enjoyed the Outdoor Boys. Very relaxing, good-hearted. Just family stuff.
That's it. It's wholesome, isn't it? It's wholesome. As you say, there's no agenda, wholesome content, and you can relax late into the evening with some Outdoor Boys.
It wasn't always relaxing into the evening. Sometimes it was 3, 4 in the morning, just like trying to stay awake as I was taking care of dad duties.
Yeah. I know the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in terms of setting the scene, let's talk a little bit about Brave Bison for those that maybe aren't aware. You guys are an officially recognized partner of YouTube. So us bringing you on here to talk about YouTube isn't just for no reason. You guys are recognized by YouTube as someone that can help people in this space. So for those perhaps that aren't familiar, just give a little bit of a rundown of the work that you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, Brave Bison as an entity, as a whole group, has changed a lot in the last 2 years. So probably my answer a couple of years ago would be very different than it is today in terms of kind of the services we provide as an organization. We've had acquisitions in the areas of, influencer marketing and paid media, and of course engage digital partners, so another sports agency that we acquired. So in terms of our remit and the services we can provide, that all feeds back into the core of what we do in my team, which is really develop YouTube channels and grow YouTube channels for governing bodies and big sporting organizations. And really that's across the key metrics of viewership, subscriber growth, and ultimately watch time and revenue. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more today, but really that comes down to like the core services that we provide, and content strategy being a real main one. So really answering the why, like why are you creating what you're creating on the platform? What is the purpose of it? Channel management, so best practice to make sure that the content sings on the platform, everything titling to thumbnails and publication and everything you need to do on a day-to-day basis to make sure your videos are performing as well as they can. Rights management, massively important in sports, and often actually a gateway when we're speaking to rights holders about why they want our services. They don't have that expertise in how to manage rights and protect the rights of their broadcast partners as well. And then production, so producing content, being out in the field, capturing content on site, but also creating stuff in studio and from the archive as well. So a real whistle stop 30,000 foot capture of what we do, but in a nutshell, that's where we're at.
And one thing you did mention, a little off piece now, I've recently learned how much science goes into the art of creating a thumbnail.
Oh yeah.
Like, can you quickly just like talk through that? Because I think that's probably something that I didn't realize how important it was to like the algorithm and performance.
Oh yeah, massively important. I mean, it's really important for click-through rate, and also the main thing that YouTube are focusing on now, and this is reflected in the A/B testing, is that it's not just about the click-through rate, but about the watch time versus retention rate, right? So they're wanting people not only to click on your thumbnail, but also to stay there for actually to reflect the content that they're watching. So obviously it's important to make sure, the best practices being followed, making sure your thumbnails are engaging, that they're exciting, that they often in sport, what we know works well is when they show a reaction and emotion, especially when it comes to, if you're a winning moment of a golfer or someone winning a tennis championship, you want that moment that will drive clicks and get people clicking. So obviously with A/B testing, that's really up the game in terms of what we can do. And so that adds a whole nother layer of not only A/B testing the thumbnail, but also the title and thumbnail combination, taking one out, having a control in there, like a control method, to understand exactly what's making the difference when it comes to clickability of a thumbnail.
Honestly, it just really intrigued me, like the science behind that. But I guess, again, just finally sort of setting the scene there, as you've kind of allayed there, Brave Bison sits in an interesting place in the intersection of sports, media, broadcast, agencies, that whole space there. What have you noticed probably in the last 5 years as a trend in terms of the way YouTube is being viewed by the industry?
Yeah, so I think there's clearly been like platform changes, right? There's been a huge emphasis on YouTube Shorts. I mean, it's dating back quite a while now, but of course the monetization of YouTube Shorts has changed things a little bit. And so when you go onto the homepage now, you're pretty inundated with YouTube, with short form content, as well as the video on demand stuff. So that's obviously a big change there. We've also seen the huge increase in watch time on TV. So before the pandemic, it was around 20. We were seeing around 20% of watch time on the channels in our network came from TV devices. Nowadays, it's 70% upwards, and there's a bit of a chicken and egg going on there. Like, people see that content on TV performs well, but there's more opportunities to implement mid-roll and monetize at a higher level. So they're creating content specifically for TV, but that's like a massive shift in connected TV devices. Has been huge. And then, of course, new routes to monetization, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but, looking at membership options. We're big in the world of partner sold as well. So providing additional value for our partners through selling to their headline sponsors. And then, of course, like an increase in the growth of integrating merchandise and super chats and everything else that goes with it as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about the monetization part next, but you brought up something that I think is really interesting. It clicked for me, like from an anecdotal perspective. The how, I do the onboarding for our new starters, and we kind of talk about digital transformation, what's occurred, and we talk about, how do people consume content. It used to be YouTube is probably largely, you were doing it on your PC, your laptop, that traditional way. Whereas now, like, it is on the TV screen. Like, I think about, my wife and I, and there's so many statistics about it, and I'm going to talk about it later, is the connected TV. Like, I probably spend more time on my actual big screen TV watching videos on YouTube. And it is kind of incredible, I think, how commonplace that probably is now in terms of a consumption medium.
Yeah, I mean, is the question that we're always asked is, is YouTube becoming a de facto broadcaster, right? Like that's a really big topic, and I think that the stats of people watching on connected TVs would suggest that that's the case. Obviously, I think that there's definitely been a shift towards short form content in the form of YouTube Shorts, and then longer form content. And as I say, a bit of a chicken and egg, people creating long form content for the monetization opportunity there too. But that's really where we've seen that divide. You're seeing content that's under a minute performing well on mobile. You're seeing long form content performing well on TV.
Makes sense. So speaking specifically about the monetization, YouTube, it feels like has done quite a bit in the last couple of years trying to change things up from a monetization perspective. There's always been the ad component of it, but they are slowly unveiling new ways to monetize, different things like membership, subscriptions. I think they're testing out some pay-per-view, doing all different things. Obviously, there's the stuff you can do that isn't directly with YouTube, whether that might be sponsorship, things like that. From a sports perspective, what are the monetization models you're seeing that are having the most success?
Yeah. It's interesting because there's definitely a big gulf between when it comes to auction ads, like regular Google auction ads. There's a big gulf between certain rights holders that are generating significant revenue and those which are struggling. And a lot of it comes down to the audience composition. So I think it goes without saying that if most of your audience is US and Anglosphere based, you're likely to generate higher CPMs. And as a result of that, more revenue in your pocket. There's also how much you're giving back to the platform in terms of those retained rights. So we're seeing like our partners, like the PGA Tour, for example, when we first started working with them, they were intent on publishing very short highlights. And a lot of that worked for the platform, 10 years ago. Whereas nowadays, we've said, look, a key goal for us is to increase that watch time and the visibility of the content. Can we look at publishing some legacy full rounds? So from old tournaments, Tiger Woods classics from 1999, the stuff that fans from all ages just love, right? And so with a video like that, the RPMs are, $30, $40, $50 upwards, right? Whereas when most of your audience is based in, India and Bangladesh, which is what some of our cricket partners struggle with in particular, you see an absolute fraction of that, you're talking cents on the dollar. So when it comes to auction, there's that big divide, and where it's about, okay, how can we target the high yielding territories as a big goal for us. But we also do this through partner sold as well. So that's selling inventory on a channel to the sponsorship partners of a particular governing body. So for someone like the US Open, it will be their headline sponsors for the tournament. Okay, can we package up that inventory, take it to market with you, and sell it into your sponsors to run as pre-roll, mid-roll, and that will increase your CPMs that you're seeing across your channel by 3, 4, 5x as a result of that. So that's one way through partner sold. Memberships is a really interesting one, and one that we're looking into more and more with our partners. We're seeing that a lot of our challenger brand partners aren't getting the revenue that they once were from broadcast.
Yeah.
And even if they are getting revenue from there, the deals are worth a lot less than they were a few years ago, which is a common theme. And so they're looking at ways in which they can maximize the revenue from YouTube. And memberships is a great way of doing that, because you don't need a huge audience to actually be making a significant amount of revenue. And certainly some of the challenger brands that we're seeing, like small Olympic committees, as an example, have got that core base of 1, 2, 3,000 members who are each paying a subscription each month, and actually that's the sum of the parts is actually much bigger than they would be receiving from putting that on a traditional linear broadcast. So memberships is very, very interesting. Currently there's definitely some work to do from YouTube to make it more accessible for partners. Like there's no geo gating of memberships currently, which is a big one that I've been pushing for. So if YouTube are watching, that would be great. But that would allow any partner, if they've got retained rights in X, Y, and Z region, to actually then have a membership option on YouTube as an alternative to a linear broadcast. So memberships is a big one, especially for emerging brands. So that's all really good. And then sponsorships, of course, like when you're looking at sponsors, there's plenty of different innovative ways of doing it. And one of the things that we're seeing, and we saw actually in the Australian Open, is utilizing YouTube Shorts for sponsorship. And actually having YouTube or digital first sponsors come on board. So it's not necessarily your headline sponsors that have been on board sponsoring the whole event for decades, but actually new digital focused sponsors. So the Australian Open have Kraken. So it's very much a modern digital brand. And having that as a sponsor for YouTube Shorts was really, really key to some of their growth this year.
One of the things you talked about there with the memberships, I actually don't know this, out of curiosity. Is there an increase in the amount of data that can then be available? Because I think one of the things that's been brought up, and I hear a lot, is people talk about owning fans. And I think one of the things that the YouTube's great for is scale and reach, but there's not always necessarily known platforms. So do you know with some of these monetization models like membership, does that potentially allow more data, or is it still the same amount?
Your spot on. The restriction is third party versus first party data, right? You have an OTT platform, you've got all the data to hand. Whereas on YouTube you don't, and plus you're giving a percentage. But the benefit is that you're not having to shell out to create that system in the first place, right? And also it exists within your ecosystem. So Patreon, other crowd kind of funding, support membership options, they're great, but they're off platform. So integrating within the YouTube platform obviously is a huge benefit to actually retaining people. But at this stage, I don't think there's plans to give additional information that's not currently contained within the YouTube analytics on the back end.
Now, when you work with a new partner, chances are they've probably already been doing something on YouTube. I doubt that they've come to you with nothing on the table. Is there anything that's a common theme that you have to tell people, like, hey, maybe you should stop doing this? Or there's a commonality between the people that come out to you for the first time with how they've previously approached YouTube versus, hey, these are some simple things that you should consider changing or adding to that you're not already doing?
Yeah. So there's obviously a layer of best practice, right? And there's the knowledge of knowing what works for the platform and for certain audiences. But really every organization is different, and there's content that works for one organization, one governing body, inevitably won't work for another, just because of the fan makeup. So an example of this would be someone like World Endurance Championship, right? Where a lot of their fans are quite technically minded. So we know that technical content that goes into the details, goes into the pit lane, talks to the engineers, is going to resonate more than similar content on, say, the Australian Open, which is like they brand themselves as the happy slam, as Roger Federer once alluded to, and they've really taken that on board. So everything has to be kind of lighthearted, and that's what viewers expect when they go onto that channel. It's it's the interactions between the fans and the players, and the ball kids and the players, and it's all about showcasing the stuff around the game as opposed to just the match itself. So so when organizations come to us, there's definite like best practice that we put into place, but it's all about kind of understanding what the nuances are of their audience.
And I guess that kind of leaves the question, what, in your opinion, and again, this might be one of those things where, like, depending on who it is, the answer is going to change. Is it the format? Is it the creator? Is it the content? I think the point I'm sort of getting at here is Erling Haaland has a YouTube channel. Most of his best performing stuff has nothing to do with football.
Yep.
It's other things. So it's just kind of curious, like, again, are there consistencies, or is it, every group is going to be different in terms of like what performs well? But like, would you say there is a priority between who's actually producing the content versus what maybe the format is, whether it's long form, short form,
Yeah.
or it's the content? Is it focused on the sport, or is it, one of the side pieces around, sports fashion? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, it makes sense. And one of the things that we are doing more and more with a lot of the data tools, naturally the acquisition of Engage, is understanding audience affinities better and using data to understand audience affinities. And someone like Harland, who's doing content around entertainment, and others who are doing content around who are sports stars who are doing content around music, or is understanding what those the Venn diagram is, where the crossover is between audiences. And one of the great tools that we have is an audience affinity tool, where we can say, okay, your audience is X times more likely to be interested in Y. So Erland Haaland's audience is 7 times more likely to be interested in rap music. And that's really powerful data, not only for your ideation and your content strategy, but also when you're approaching brands. You say, okay, well, Haaland fans are X times more likely to be interested in, I don't know, Monster Munch, right? And you can go to that brand and talk to them and say, right, this is the data, this is what we've pulled. We can understand that there's that affinity between the audiences.
Yeah. And in terms of when we start talking about the monetization side of things, I think everyone's always looking for the silver bullet, and it just doesn't exist that way. When you speak to people and you tell them, they come to you because they know there's an intrinsic value in having a presence on YouTube and having a refined strategy for YouTube. When you're telling about perhaps the extent of what they could get out of YouTube from a monetary perspective, what are you usually kind of saying is realistic? And again, this is going to depend on how much are you willing to invest on the production side, how much you're willing to put into it. But for a standard budget, standard approach, is there something you're telling people is a realistic amount that they can look to make? And maybe we can separate this between from an advertisement perspective through the traditional Google models versus what potentially exists from a sponsorship perspective. Is there a general ballpark or a rough estimate?
Good, Chris, you'd love me to say it's going to be 500,000 in the first year, and then it's going to be 2 million in the second year. And we do projections, of course, we do projections, but they're based on the data that's provided and the access that we have to what their audience makeup is, what their retained rights are. That's a huge one. Like if you've got no retained rights on your channel and it's all kind of around the game stuff, you can build an audience from that. But it's going to take longer, and it's going to take a dedicated fan base to be able to do that. And so there's a lot of data that's involved in coming up with what those projections are for like years 1, 2, and 3. But I think that the opportunity for massive organizations, I work with the PGA Tour, the Australian Open, US Open, Ryder Cup, loads of golf and motorsport, tennis, cricket, etc. And there's an opportunity there for like incremental gains to grow their audience, but it's going to be dwarfed by it's inevitably going to be dwarfed by their broadcast deals that they have in place, because they're multi-year, multi-million pound deals that they have. For emerging partners, it can be a game changer. It really can, and in a variety of different ways. So we work with the likes of GT World, so endurance racing. They do 16 different series across 4 continents. Huge operation. They stream like 3,000 hours on YouTube globally, right? You can't watch anywhere else. It's YouTube alone. So if you're a endurance motorsport fan, it's the place to be, right? And we started them, goodness me, I think it was way before my time at Brave Bison. So I think about 2012. And so a long-standing partnership. And their goal is obviously to generate revenue on the platform via auction ads and via partner sold. We do our channel takeovers with some of the headline sponsors as well. But another one of their key goals is actually to expand that reach, not only to build up their audience of like a developing emerging challenger brand where they've been going for a little while now, but also to get like amateur racers interested in potentially being involved. Because most of their one of their biggest revenue streams is getting drivers there. So even though they're actually making considerable revenue because their content's really, really long form. It's live stream. And what we find is that they'll put out a video in 2017, and in 2026, that stream, because it's generated so much watch time over the years, it will suddenly spike and peak, and you have people commenting saying that they woke up and they were watching it because it was it was recommended to them during the middle of the night, right, and they fell asleep. So, but ultimately, like, there isn't a golden figure that we can look at and say this is exactly what you'll make. But we're confident that if you retain the rights to your content, that you implement both auction ads, partner sold, and open to the other opportunities like memberships, like merchandise, that it can change the game, especially for challenger brands.
So it's interesting that example you gave. Participation's obviously a key part of how they drive monetization, which we were talking about the third party versus first party. Do you provide any sort of insights or strategy? Because presumably there will be other people you work with that will have their own platform. Are there strategies that you can help them with from a YouTube perspective to drive them from YouTube as a platform onto other platforms? Is that part of the conversations you have? Where
Yeah, no, it is. And work with another endurance
yeah,
championship called World Endurance Championship,
yeah,
part of Le Mans, part of the Le Mans series. And one of their biggest goals is driving people to the OTT
yeah,
platform as well. So and they just launched their OTT this year, like fully launched it. And so one of the things that we're doing with them is looking at ways in which we can provide some live value on their channels, like the European Le Mans Series channel, where we show like the first hour, 90 minutes of a race with the intention of them pushing people to the OTT platform.
Yeah.
So going, okay, if you want to watch the rest of the race, the rest of the series, here's how you can do it, and providing that direct link over to there. There's inevitably ways in which you can do it through like the community tab, using that as a way in which you can drive traffic. And obviously cards, end cards, and all the stuff that's integrated within YouTube to drive people over to OTT, and really having that call to action as well, making sure that it's explicit within the content.
And I think that's got to be so important because we're looking at the whole ecosystem. Like YouTube is just going to be one part of your overall media strategy. And I think to your point, it's great for the reach flight. They still want to get the first party data. So I think that's just got to be an essential part of the conversation when you're having with people is like, yes, we want you to invest in YouTube. We want you to be serious about it. But there are also ways that YouTube can deliver value that isn't intrinsically just tied to the platform.
Exactly. That's it. And I think a lot of partners have moved away from just thinking it's like a marketing funnel, like a way of just getting people to somewhere else. I think that's great. Like people are viewing it as a destination now, which has to be good. And also it's realistic. I mean, we might touch upon it a little bit later, but the BBC being a big one recently, where they view YouTube as a destination now. Clearly, with the partnership on YouTube, they know that their audience is there, and they're meeting their audience where they are, as opposed to where they hypothetically would want them to be. We see, linear broadcast being reduced, people's paying for TV licenses reducing, and so it's a switch up, a big change. And I think that's felt across the board. It's not just big news organizations like the BBC, but actually sports organizations that see it as an entity in its own right. And that's taken a long time to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to talk about it anyways, so we can just dive into it. How potentially important or a watershed moment is that seeing BBC do that? I believe they're going to launch 50 dedicated channels. It's not just going to be necessarily simply redistributing. They are going to put bespoke content on YouTube for that. And I think to your point, they listed the statistics about how prevalent usage is of YouTube, and it was a comment that you made earlier where there has to be a really serious question about, is YouTube this thing that exists as a streaming platform or social media platform, however you want to define it, or is it is actually the new TV? And is that signaling that there's a change? Do you expect similar things to potentially happen on other sides? Is this just the beginning, or is it a unique deal?
I don't think it's going to be a unique deal. Like we've spoken with other news groups within the space about not necessarily about a partnership with YouTube in such a way, but like how can we make YouTube a hub in its own right? And that's as recently as last week. And so there's going to be more new traditional news organizations that move not only to YouTube but to other social platforms and understand that they are like kind of hubs in their own right and where their audience is. I think this one's really interesting because of the license fee and that element of it. Like traditionally they would, obviously everything to do with the first party data and keeping people within their ecosystem was so important because of the license fee. So that will come with its challenges, I'm sure. But yeah, I would be very surprised if this is the end of this movement of traditional broadcasters moving into this space.
Yeah, and just to bring us back to wrap up the monetization side, I know you've given a couple examples here, but the Australian Open is also a partner of you guys, and you spoke about you've done some case studies on the really tremendous success there, and I
Yeah.
think that perhaps provides some opportunity to give a little bit more tangibility about the
Mm.
monetization side and the success you can have. Because again, you're thinking about someone that is going to have traditional broadcast
Yeah.
partners; they are going to have limitations to the things that they are able to
Mm.
do. But just because you don't necessarily have access to your rights should not be a limiting factor to what you can do from a success perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Australian Open was absolutely huge, record breaking this year. Most views across any Grand Slam ever on YouTube, which is fantastic. And one of the big things that's changed over the last few years for the Australian Open, also the US Open, who we work with, is the emphasis on the opening week. So the week
Yeah.
before the tournament starts, what traditionally would be qualifying, and few years ago, it would just be an empty ground with a few courts made up of qualifiers, right? And now it's a music festival, it's a food festival, it's, you know, you're meeting with the players, there's loads of practice going on. There's absolutely, I don't know if you've ever been to the US Open or the Australian Open, but it's just filled with kids and their parents, and the excitement is tangible. So that's changed. And a big one this year for the Australian Open was the introduction of the 1 point slam. I'm not sure if you watched it. It was live streamed on YouTube. So that did incredibly well. It was also on ESPN and Nine and some of their other broadcasters as well. But new formats, and one of the great things about working with the Australian Open specifically is that they are innovators. Like they want to push the boundaries of what's been done before, and so we are very much along on that journey with them, and looking at ways in which we can ensure that content does the best that it can across YouTube as a platform. So not only did they have the 1 point slam, which was an absolute spectacle, and like Jannik Sinner, the #1 player in the world, hit the ball into the net on his first serve, he's out. So there's jeopardy there, right? Immediate jeopardy. But they also had exhibitions, you know, had evenings with Novak Djokovic and Alcaraz and the top players, which really made that fan week really special. So I think that's the first thing, building up the algorithm on YouTube, so that once we get to the main tournament, everyone's primed to be recommended the actual match footage in their feeds. Their feeds is really, really important. And then other things like last year, for example, we did AO Animated, another one that got quite a lot of mainstream. I guess the spotlight was shone on it in the mainstream. And that was, did you see the AO Animated stuff?
No.
Okay, so it was basically taking the match footage in real time and overlaying animations on top of it. And so it was being played in real time with kind of Wii characters hitting it back and forth, right? And what was great about that is that there's a bit of a grey area with the broadcast rights. So it was live streamed on YouTube, and it did cause a few issues. You know, we're not going to say that it didn't. But this year it was then sold into the broadcasters as another package. So yeah, the risk was taken and had some issues there, but when it came down to it, actually, it's increased the value of the tournament and increased the monetary value for the sales of their broadcast rights.
There you go. So one other example I just want to talk about, because we talked about the BBC, but there's also the recent news. I think as of when we're recording this, I think the news might have been 2 weeks ago. Mark Goldbridge, obviously a very famous content creator here in the UK with what he does, you know, originally around Man United, but now he's all doing stuff more broadly within football. There's also Gary Neville's The Overlap, which has built a lot of success. They have also done some stuff beforehand with the Bundesliga, with what the Bundesliga is doing here in the UK. But Gary Neville and The Overlap have acquired Mark Goldbridge. And I think it is interesting. You see some people on social media like, oh, he's a sellout, da 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 da. But it's also like Mark Goldbridge is kind of an OG. Like there's so many people that, whether or not they want to admit they were inspired by him, there's many people who at least aspire to be him. And the fact that he's now gone from essentially creating an IP to selling it for 7 figures, like that is an incredibly impressive move, regardless of whether you want to hate on him or not. The fact that he's gone and taken something and what that means from we keep talking about, is this the new media? Is this the new space? Like it's being valued like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I think it's no surprise to anyone who's been within the space for the last few years that creators and influencers are becoming increasingly important across all aspects. You know, they really own that younger audience. You only have to look at golf as a good example.
100%.
You look at all of the golf influencers, you look at good golf, and their numbers are fantastic. You look at the PGA Tour investing in creators with the Creator Classic. Huge. I mean, the first one did over 2 million views, and the others haven't been far off since then. So there's this understanding that creators are you know, the lifeblood, at least, of the younger golfing audience and the future there. I mean, in the golf space, you've got the Good who have the Good Championship. They're sponsoring one of the PGA Tour events, which is a complete turnabout. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've shared this example before, but for you, because you might not have heard it, I had never golfed before last year.
Yeah.
I saw a YouTube short of Bryson.
Yeah.
I then went on from the short form to watch a long form where he was prepping for the US Open. I then went and watched the US Open for the first time, then went and got a secondhand set of clubs, went and got golf lessons, and now I'm golfing whenever my wife will let me out of the house with the kid and all that. But like, I feel like that's the story everyone tells that they hope it's true. Like that was actually my real life experience. And I would argue, golf has probably benefited more than any other sport when it comes to the content creator space.
Oh, it's wild, and I mean the pandemic had a big play. Like you couldn't do anything apart except for go and play golf.
Yeah, right.
And so people were shooting it out, and also golf. I was speaking actually to a few of my colleagues about this week. Golf is so unique in a sense that you have so much time where you're not playing the sport, and that's where you can show off your personality. So it doesn't quite translate to other sports in the same way when it comes to kind of participation, because you don't have that. I mean, with tennis, if influencers stop playing and if they're out of breath and trying to check, it doesn't have the same gaps and natural flow in the sport. So I think golf's quite uniquely positioned. But yeah, I think we're going to see more and more of media organizers, traditional media organizations, understanding that the creator space is where the audience is, and the audience is where the revenue is.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to wrap things up, we're looking forward. So I think there's definitely things that if we looked at 5 years ago, we wouldn't have expected. We're talking about media, I don't know, content creators are now broadcasters. We've seen things like Casa TV down in Brazil that are now live streaming the World Cup. We probably would have never guessed that 5 years ago. Is there something that you think, putting your predictive mind on, you think we'll see on YouTube that right now we might say, but like, oh, that was so obvious. Like, what do you think might be something?
It's a difficult question, the crystal ball question. I think that YouTube as a destination for live content will continue to be that, and that will ramp up. So now people think of, okay, well, if I want to watch live sport, I'm going to Sky Sports, or I'm going to Amazon, or wherever it is, DAZN. I do think the YouTube will be within that conversation as probably the number one. And with that, not only just the live content, but also immediate replay. I think that more broadcasters will go, okay, soon as the content's finished on there, we have an opportunity to replay it on YouTube. So first port of call for a lot of people will be for live sport, and nearly live sport will be YouTube. I think that will continue. I do think that integration of AI tools will become increasingly prevalent. I mean, one that I've been using recently is the music tool, where you can make your own playlists by giving prompts, right? You can say, I want this type of style of music. It gives you a playlist. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's rolled out to a wide array of content, array of video content. Like I'm in this mood, I want to watch this type of content, and then actually you can curate AI playlists off the back of that. So I think that'll be really interesting. And then I think more partnerships like the BBC deal, where traditional broadcasts are coming to YouTube and saying, look, we know our audience is here. Can we partner with you to make it happen, and see some commercial value in some ways, but also just value in terms of growing their audience there?
I agree. I think it's got to be a concern for traditional media that does become really successful. What does that say for the traditional model? And I know for me, like being American, small anecdote, my parents and then all my friends, they all have YouTube TV, which we've obviously not seen introduced in the UK and Europe, largely because of, the established pay TV model that exists over here. But when I go home, YouTube TV, it's a great experience. And I think, could the BBC, like, could that be an entryway into that sort of thing? And certainly something I agree with you. I think if I'm traditional media, I'm not sure how successful I want to see that become.
I know, right? Yeah, it's potentially worrying times, but then it has been probably the BBC probably said this way back when, before they launched iPlayer, right? And then that was a huge success. And so you move with the times, and those that do will succeed, and those that don't will be left behind. And that's the cutthroat nature of it.
It's always the way.
Yeah.
Well, Martin, I appreciate you coming on, talking to us about all things YouTube. Really appreciated it. Some good case studies in there for anyone that needs any help, is curious more about optimizing their performance. You can certainly reach out to Martin and the team at Brave Bison.
Excellent. Thanks, Ren.